I couldn't believe the question. They said, will you place her in one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at that and I said, exactly. That would be my question. Assalamu alaikum. I've come from the University of Kansas. We're playing in the Final Four this very instant. So I want to let you know that you've asked a lot of me today. No, I'm just joking. All right, very briefly, I just want to talk a little bit about what the Quran has to say about the purpose of life. I think this is an extremely important subject, especially for Muslims living in America, because we're sort of a minority, a new religion here, and many people are interested in what we believe. And I think the primary question that people want answered when they first consider another religion is how that religion views the purpose of life, the purpose of of our existence here. And so I'm going to begin, though, talking about an atheist point of view, because I want to talk about what sort of answers the Quran might have for an atheist. So to begin this, I need to talk for about 5 or 10 minutes about what I believe contributed to my becoming an atheist, because I grew up in a Christian family. And then I'll talk for about 45 minutes or so about what I experienced in the Quran and how that sort of changed my perception. So it's very simple. But my wife always says I should summarize what I'm going to do before I talk, because it's easy to get lost in my speeches. And my wife doesn't have a lot of confidence in my speaking ability. Okay, so let me start out by mentioning that my mother certainly played no role in my becoming an atheist. My mother was a wonderful woman, a beautiful lady. She had tremendous dignity and class. The neighbors loved her. She was a registered nurse, and she put in many extra hours at the hospital. She worked in the ward that dealt with dying patients. And when I would come and pick her up late from work at night, not all the patients, but many of the patients would drag me over and talk to me and tell me what a wonderful woman my mother was. When she died, her funeral was packed, and person after person that came up to me had a story to tell about my mother and her goodness. Time and time again, people described her as, Jeff, your mother is a true saint. She was a deeply religious woman, a great mother, a great teacher, a gentle person. She never cursed. I never heard her curse, swore ever in her whole life. Never heard her speak to anybody rudely or speak about anyone rudely. She was a tremendous example of a truly religious person, and she didn't wear it on her sleeve. It was just slowly but surely you could see it just in her day-to-day interactions with people. My father, on the other hand, was a difficult man. My father, for some strange reason, had this tremendous rage inside him. I don't know where he got it. He had this terrible violence inside him. And every night he would try to quell that violence with hard drinking. And his drinking, though, only made him all the more volatile. Because my father could be laughing and joking one minute, and he could fly into an angry rampage the next for some unexpected reason. You never know what would trigger it. And once he flew into that angry rampage, it would take, he would just go wild in the house would be in havoc, and he would rage on and on and on, and it would take an awful lot of liquor and several hours before he would finally go to sleep. And this would happen night after night after night. And so my 4 brothers and I was the 4th in line, My 4 brothers and I lived a frightening and precarious childhood, but I'd have to say the worst of it was watching my father regularly taunt and threaten and abuse my mother. And it would happen day in, day in, day in, day out, night in, night out. And it was a never-ending nightmare. You see, it's really not so bad when you're the target of your father's violence. You might think it's bad when a child is the target of their father's violence, but it's really not all that bad. At the moment of attack, you're really not thinking about anything except your own survival. When he's firing punches at you or kicking you on the ground or chasing you throughout the house, or when he's threatening you, "I'm going to hurt you, bad boy," you're not thinking about anything at that moment except escape. While all that's going on, you're not thinking about the aftermath or consequences, the psychological repercussions or anything like that. And when it's all over, you might even excuse the onslaught because you figure maybe you somehow deserved it. If not for what you did this time, maybe for something you did in the past. You could always put the blame on yourself. But a far worse fear is the terror that overcomes you when you watch your father go after your mother. Because she's the only source of warmth and kindness, of love and protection that you know. And if he were to take that away, from a little boy's standpoint, then you've lost everything. But far worse than the fear is the guilt, and it comes over you from several directions. First of all, there's the guilt that comes at you upon you from the growing antipathy you have towards your father. Because we're taught to love and respect our parents, and we are born with this natural bonding attachment to them. But when you watch something like this happen night after night after night, and this rage is growing inside you, you're being pulled in opposite directions. Then there's also, of course, the guilt that comes when you think that you might be the cause of this night's violence. Maybe something you said or did that you didn't even realize triggered it. Maybe just your father's dislike of you triggered an argument between your mom and him that is now raging on downstairs. But the worst guilt of all, and it is by far the very worst, is knowing that you did nothing to stop your father from hurting your mother. Because while he raged on against your mother downstairs, you hid in your bed and you trembled underneath the covers. Maybe you whimpered and you cried and you put the pillow on your head. And thus, you traded personal respect for personal safety. And with each such incident, you come to realize with ever greater and greater clarity, you come to realize your own weakness, your own impotence, your own incompetence, your own worthlessness, your own cowardice. And the hate grows and festers inside you, not only for the man that you call father, but for yourself as well. It is a terrible, terrible thing to make a young boy choose between his mother and himself. It is extremely unfair. I noticed that tomorrow there's going to be tomorrow morning a lecture about spousal abuse given by Dr. Shaheen Rizwan. I hope you'll all attend it. I think it's a very important subject. When I was little, I used to daydream about life without my father. I just wanted the violence to go away. I wanted not to be afraid anymore. I felt like I was trapped in a bad dream and there was no way out. And so I prayed to God again and again and again to remove my father from our lives. But he was always there, and very soon I began to wonder if God really was. I could not fathom why God would subject my mom to such lifelong punishment. I could not imagine what great sin she must have committed, or that we, her children, must have committed to deserve my father. I didn't have the maturity to sort out such questions, but I had enough fear and anger to provoke them. I was too young to see the wisdom in allowing my mom to suffer the violence and abuse of my father. I was too young to understand why God would let innocent children tremble night after night after night in their beds. fearing that they might not see their mother the next morning. I was too young to see how the mercy of God could even extend to my father with all his terrible failings. All I could see in my world was chaos and violence and fear, and so it became easy for me to question the existence of God. And I began to do that at a very early age. I think I'll even say that the turmoil of the 60s and 70s, that's the age when I was a teenager, in the late 60s, early 70s, only reinforced my skepticism. When John and Robert F. Kennedy were assassinated, or Martin Luther King was gunned down, when Vice President Agnew was kicked out of office and Richard Nixon soon after him, when the race riots erupted in city streets like mine, and gang fights erupted in our cities, many of those which I was involved in, when I saw the bizarre and senseless carnage of Vietnam, they all confirmed the lesson that was already ingrained in me and that my father had taught me so well, that the world is dominated by random, consuming, undiscriminating violence. And very soon I began to ask why. Why would God make it that way? Why wouldn't he just pop us into heaven from the first and spare us all this suffering? Why does he let little children in Vietnam get napalmed and run down the street naked on fire when they had done nothing to deserve it? And why does he let the race riots go on? Why does he let the leaders be assassinated? Why does he just let the violence go on and on and on for people who had nothing to do with it? It wasn't of their own making. Why didn't he just make us angels and pop us into heaven if he could make us angels, which I was always taught he could?
يا دول، يا أهل العرب، يا عرب، يا كل الدول النايمة، يا الخلايا النايمة، اصحوا على حالكم. نحن عنا الله، اليوم والتاني عم يروح لنا عينات وطائفات. عنا الله، وهذا انشروها، أما نروح بدكم انشروها على كل الدول. كل يوم ما بيروحوا شهداء، عندك أطفال، نحن أرهابيين نحن.
Why did he make us so susceptible to sin? Why didn't he make us impervious to it, like he made the angels? Is this the best world he could create, I thought? Is this the most perfect world he could create for our existence, for our beginning? I just couldn't figure it. And all the explanations I received from priests and doctors and lawyers, from whoever, spoke to me or taught me, they just didn't make sense to me. In any case, so I became an atheist when I was 16, even though I was going to Catholic school at the time. Declared myself an atheist in one class. It was a confrontation between me and a priest. We were talking about God and the purpose of life. And I expressed my views, and he said, well, then you don't believe in God. I said, well, I guess I don't. And then through my junior and senior year of high school, I got an F in religion, even though I continued to do very well in the tests. In any case, when I was 28, to make a long story short, some friends of mine gave me a copy of the Quran. And one night I was sitting in Diamond Heights, my apartment in Diamond Heights in San Francisco. I was working that time at the University of San Francisco. I was 27, 28 at that time, I can't remember. And I ran out of stuff to read, and I took this gift that my friends gave me and I began to read it. And I came to the first verse. Well, I opened the Quran, read the first page, then the second, and then very quickly, in the second surah, about 37 verses into the Quran, I came upon the story of mankind. And I have to admit, I read through it very quickly. It was about 9-10 verses long, the story of the first man and woman. And I recognized some of the details. It was similar to what I had learned when I was a child, but I noticed that there was something wrong. It was apparent to me that whoever authored this Quran, of course I wasn't a Muslim at the time, so I didn't have any idea who that was, whoever authored this Quran clearly did not understand the real meaning of the story, because they had obviously gotten the details confused. They didn't even understand the whole purpose of the story. And so I just read through it once, and then I read through it again, just to try to see what kind of point the author was making, and then I read through it a third time and a fourth, and then I realized this is something strange going on here. I'm going to read this much more carefully. I'm going to need to go through this story line by line, verse by verse, because it's obvious that the author is trying to bring out another point. And I wasn't quite sure what it was, but definitely he packs a lot of meaning into almost every word. And I thought the writer at least seems to have a great measure of brilliance. And so I'll try to sort of take you through what my experience was as quickly as I can. So I came to the 30th verse of the second surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, and it began like this. It said, "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." The Arabic word is khalifa. It means a representative or an emissary of mine. "I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." And they said, the angels said, "Will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify your holiness?" And God said, He said, "Truly I know what you do not know." See, that's the verse that hooked me. That's the verse that caught my attention. That's the one that kept on making me read the story again and again and again. Because listen to the way it begins. "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a representative of mine on earth, a vicegerent of mine, an emissary, one who acts on my behalf." I thought, that's not the way it goes. You're not supposed to be placing man on the earth in some positive role, some elective office. You place man on earth as a punishment for his sin. Clearly, I knew the author didn't quite get the point. But still, it was an amazing line. But then I come to the next line, and it says, "And the angels say, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify you?" I looked at it again. I couldn't believe the question. They said, "Will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you?" I looked at that and I said, exactly. That would be my question. Why would you create this being, supposedly for some positive role, when he's capable of doing tremendous wrongdoing? When he could spread corruption and shed much blood? Why would you create this violent and pernicious creature when you could create angels? As the angels clearly say, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you. They're asking one of the most fundamental questions in the entire history of religion. Why create you, man, this utterly fallible creature, this creature who could rebel against God's will, who could do such tremendous wrongdoing, who could wreak havoc like no other creature on earth, when you can make them angels? And look where the question is being asked. It's being asked in heaven. It's almost like saying, look, why don't you just make them angels and be up here in heaven with us, Why don't you just make them angels, pop them into heaven, he's fine. Why would you put him on earth where he could feel distant from you, where he can work out his worst criminal tendencies, act them out, feeling somehow independent and apart from you and free to do whatever he wants, when you could just make them angels and put them into heaven and make them perfectly submissive to your will? I looked at that question and said, that's my question. I'm not even a single verse into the story of mankind, and there before me I see my question. That whole question, everything that I ever thought, everything that I ever experienced, everything that I ever knew was in that question. It was as if the author took my life and wanted to pick out exactly the right question to humiliate me, to provoke me, to anger me. Why create man, this most destructive and violent creature, when you could make him angels? And then look at the answer. And he said, God said, "Truly I know what you do not know." In modern parlance, we would say, I know exactly what I'm doing. I read that and said, what? You know what you do not know? You know exactly what you're doing? Well, please inform me. Tell me what you're doing. Because, I'm 28 years old and I haven't figured out it yet. And I have a lot of issues that I'm still dealing with that's connected to this question. You can't just get off that easy. You can't just tell me you know exactly what you're doing. Not after what I've been through. Not after you made me this way. And then I realized, of course, I was arguing with a God I didn't even believe in. And that would happen several times as I read through the Quran. And sometimes I would just get into so agitated by what I read, I'd start arguing with this voice that I'm reading before me, that's calling to me. So we turn to the next verse. Well, it turns out that the Quran just doesn't dismiss the question. It starts to answer it a little bit. And in the next verse it says, and he taught Adam, God taught Adam, the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. So this verse is clearly referring to the previous one. But notice what it says. Now, from my own background, I remember Adam naming things, but it wasn't connected to any answer to any philosophical question. But here, notice what it says. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And I realized already, just from the first verse, you got to read these verses very carefully because it's packed with a lot of symbolism and meaning. And he taught Adam the names of all things. So here we see Adam is not only just a creature who knows how to name things, who's acquiring the gift of language, but he's also a learning creature. God is teaching him. Now right here, right in this verse, and it'll come even clearer in the subsequent verses, that the very first thing that the Quran is going to emphasize here is man's intellect. He is a learning creature. He is taught. And what is he taught? What is one of the great intellectual gifts he's given in response to the angel's question? The gift of language. Because through language, mankind can not only learn, but he could learn things not only through his own experience, but he could learn things that other people have experienced of times and places that are hundreds, thousands of years and miles separated from him. And so that all our knowledge becomes cumulative. Every generation learning from the generation before it. I'm learning today from authors I read from other sides of the world that may have existed 2,000 years ago. And so we all contribute to our collective learning and knowledge. And so what I'll see later in the Quran, when the Quran will emphasize this again and again and again. Like in one verse it says, read in the name of your Lord who created a man out of a tiny creature that clings. Read, it commands the reader. For your Lord is most bountiful. Why is he most bountiful? What great gift did he give you? For he taught man the use of the pen, and through it taught him what he otherwise could not know. And time again, the Quran will call upon man to use his intellectual faculties and swear by his intellectual faculties and to use them correctly because they play a fundamental role in guiding him to truth. I never came upon a scripture that puts so much emphasis on the correct use of our intellectual faculties, on the harnessing of reason, in helping us attain to faith. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. Okay, you have this you have this natural question about this creation of mankind. Here, this mankind is this human being, this human creature is a learning creature. He has many intellectual gifts. Here, I'm going to place these things before you. Tell me their names if you are right about man. And what did the angels say? In the next verse they say, glory to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. They say this task, this intellectual test that's put before them is beyond their grasp. Notice what they emphasize. We have no knowledge. This would take knowledge. This would take an intellect that they don't possess. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. You got it. It's easy for you. You're the knowing, the wise. You have knowledge. You have wisdom. But this would take knowledge and wisdom that is beyond us.